Welcome to Optily Radio, your regular 30-minute dose of everything you need to accelerate your e-commerce marketing success.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 8 of Optily Radio, Accelerate E-commerce Marketing. I'm Nina White, host of the show, digital marketing strategist, and content specialist here at Optily. Today's episode is all about keywords and search marketing. In e-commerce, and in most other sectors, search engine marketing is a goldmine for conversions. This is the most direct way to get to your bottom of funnel customers who are actively searching for your type of product. But it looks like how people search and how marketers interact with ad platforms will continue to change in the years to come. So, let's dive into today's chat with the Search Engine Marketing Pro and learn all about where we stand with keywords and what the future may hold. Today's guest is Jon Kagan. Jon has been working in the digital marketing field since 2005 and is currently the VP of Search and Biddable Media at 9 Rooftops. Prior to this, he ran search marketing teams at Mediacom, Forbes, and Digitas. In 2013, Jon received the Google Search Excellence Award, and more recently, he's been named among PPC Heroes' top 25 most influential PPC experts. Jon is a regular contributor to Search Engine Journal and PPC chats on Twitter. And if you've tuned into previous episodes, you'll remember Kevin Stagg. Kevin is our marketing and customer director here at Optily. He's got nearly 20 years of experience working with both B2C and B2B brands, big and small, including international companies like Microsoft and Ding. So welcome to the show, Jon and Kevin.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Hey, Jon, how are you?
Doing well over there in the East Coast. Is it getting a bit muggy now?
Yeah, it's hitting at about 70 degrees, which means we all start to sweat at this point.
Definitely. Hopefully you're
That's a hot summer.
Yeah. Hopefully you're at least able to get out a bit more, things opening back up.
Yeah, exactly. It's finally be able to venture out with the family and feel a little bit more confident about things.
That's great. Glad to hear that. So why don't you just tell us a bit about yourself, your background in marketing, and what exactly you're up to now at 9 Rooftops?
Yeah, I've been in the digital space for about 16 years or now, give or take. Agency side, all but 1 year. I did work on the publisher side, working for Forbes for a year, doing their audience development. I've gone from SMB agencies and started with some of the small and earlier search marketing agencies like Did It, and have worked my way up through some of the biggest ones such as Digitas. And last 8 years now, I've been with what is now 9 Rooftops. We were actually a merger of 3 agencies last year: BFG, BLR Further, and Mark USA, to create 9 Rooftops when we have 9 offices around the country. And then I oversee the search team. So anything that goes to Google, Bing, or the similar search partners. We also help run part of the paid social initiatives and online video teams. And our clients we span the gamut of just about every vertical. We're a bit heavier on the healthcare side because we have team members that are specialized in pharmaceutical and healthcare advertising. But we touch roughly everything, a lot of CPG and e-com as well.
Great. So as someone who's been in the search engine marketing game for a while now, what are some of the big changes that you've seen across the industry?
Having been doing this for 16 years, when I first started, my primary advertising search platform was Yahoo, to give you perspective. Bing didn't exist. It was still being powered by Yahoo, and Yahoo got the bulk of my dollars. I could still buy on AOL and Ask directly. So we've come a long, long way. The concept of mobile wasn't there. Match types at that time, there was only 2. So everything has changed, all the way from the changing of the partners, government crackdown and regulations. We now have the concept of video advertising as a programmatic and biddable scenario. And we're looking at less at direct deals and standard negotiations as much as we are now. Let's go into an automated auction to try and serve our ads.
And automation must be the most exciting and also sometimes the most daunting part of search. That's what I've often observed. I'm one that would embrace it, but what's your thoughts on automation in the search space?
5 years ago, John, versus today, John, are a bit different. 5 years ago, I was very much completely against it. I don't trust the robotic overlords that are coming to take our jobs and our careers, and they don't know better than us. In this day and age, we can't function without any degree of automation. So I'm much more optimistic on it. There's a difference, though, between dealing with what we believe is the automation and dealing with the artificial intelligence that runs it. And so that's where we're trying to find that happy middle ground of how much do we let the AI do the work versus how much do we have the human intervention do the work and let the automation do the execution. So it's an ever evolving approach right now. I know some operations that are solely AI automated, and I know some that are solely manual. We like to believe that we're the best of both worlds in our scenario here.
And I imagine in that space, in my own career, I've had to deal with search accounts that are many million ad groups large. So automation is an absolute essential.
Oh, yeah.
I guess you must deal with enormous accounts that really you need to lean upon automation, as long as it's kind of managed automation, if that's not an oxymoron.
Yeah, we had an account. We don't operate with them right now, but it was an online travel account. 46 million keywords over 118 accounts. I had a full-time team of 8 solely dedicated to it. And to your point, we could not function without any degree of automation, and we had to tier out because we had to let AI run part of it for us. That being said, I also have accounts now that are only 50 keywords, and it's solely manual. So it's how much am I willing to give it, and at what point is it appropriate to let it have more control?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So do you think that automation is generally making it more accessible for novice marketers to get into this space, whereas you're seeing maybe a little bit more pushback over the lack of control from more seasoned PPC experts?
So I find that the more seasoned PPC experts are better off using automation to the degree of they know what to look out for, they know what to prevent, they know when to intercede. Where the ones that are just entering the space that want to go fully automated, it's a terrible practice in my sense. And I see these countless experts or gurus, and you see them on your Facebook feed selling you some ROI study to increase your profitability by 10,000% overnight that goes solely automated. And we've seen them come to the industry and just do very poorly and set up very poor products and services. So when someone comes into the industry, every time I bring in a new hire, my first thing is you have to be able to run an operation solely manually before we'll let you start touching the AI, before we'll start touching you the automation. Because if you can't figure out the basics, when the automation fails, or if it does fail, you have a bigger problem that you need to be able to compensate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I just remember starting out with, Google, and they make it really kind of difficult to actually run an ad campaign where you have full control over it. You have to, go and kind of navigate the back channels to let it give you all the control now. It really does push the user towards doing the smart campaigns and the automation. It really wants you to use that as opposed to giving you more control. Do you feel like you run into that a little bit?
No, to be perfectly frank and candid, I have a number of friends that work for Google. I've been offered a job at Google. I live and work with Google on a day-to-day basis. But when I look at how their current strategy is, they have gotten away from the hands-on manual methodology and are trying to lead as much up to AI and automation as possible for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they believe that they have the best approach. Sometimes it might be for their own profitability. It's kind of a mixed bag, and I don't blame them for that. But to your point, the way we've seen that Google and Bing evolve is there is more of an emphasis on ignoring the old hands-on manual outside of the initial creation and preparing you to go straight into automation. The reality is, I like automation, but I will never start a program on automation. It has to start manually before we can even turn on the automation to get that volume of demand.
Hmm.
And I guess nuance plays a strong role there, right? So each customer is a little bit different. Each of their audience profiles are a little bit different. So,
Exactly.
AI can't handle that just yet. It may claim it can to a certain extent in certain areas, and it's tracking towards that, but it's probably not quite there. And have you seen any disaster zones? Have you seen any real don't ever do this because automation really failed? Are there any kind of cautionary tales you could give our audience?
So in that scenario, I've never seen automation fail. I've seen it do what it's supposed to do, yet the user was not prepared for it to do what it was supposed to do or didn't have the full gathering and understanding. The most common example I have is a consumer wants to use or an advertiser wants to use their brand keywords on number one all the time at the top of the page for their brand keywords. All right, we'll put a target impression share bid strategy in place or AI rule or automation rule. That's perfectly fine. What they weren't prepared for was that their cost per click will quintuple or increase 10x, and then they can't figure out why they're spending so much more. And these are scenarios where the rule did what it was supposed to do, but you weren't prepared for it. Or I have scenarios where everyone wants to go into an automation system. I want to max my conversion, or I want to do a target ROAS, which is great, but you have such little conversion volume to start off with that it doesn't have a good benchmark or threshold. So the engine will work with what it has, but going off of 4 to 5 conversions over a 30-day period is not something to build a benchmark off of to let it automate off of. And so once again, it's an unrealistic expectation or a misconception of what the automation will actually do.
So keep it on a short leash to begin with and trust it over time, I suppose, is the cautionary tale for sure.
Well, that's the biggest thing is I hear people like to say, I'm going to go trust it. And especially with smaller operations in the house, they go and trust it and they don't go back and check in on it. And that's when disasters happen.
Mm-hmm.
Babysit it a bit at first before you just let it go. Awesome. So let's get into some talk about keywords here. So I know you've done some writing recently and given some speeches on if the keyword is going away. So if you want to comment on that, if you think the keyword is somehow changing in the years to come.
Yeah, if you had asked me this, so I've done a few of these articles. If you asked me the first time I published one of these articles, for about 3 years, you would have labeled me a bit of a conspiracy theorist on this one. Now I would like to say, thank God, it finally is starting to prove out to be a little bit more true, where we start looking at this, and this goes hand in hand with the automations, where we're seeing less and less of a need. We've seen a loosening of the match types. Exact match isn't exact anymore. It's close enough. Broad match modified, which they launched maybe 5 or 6 years ago, which we liked as a variation of broad match, is literally going away come July. And phrase match is now becoming a broad match modified. Traditional broad match is still there. And good for that. It's to be here as long as the industry will be around. But we're starting to see the loosening of the match types. So now what I actually use as a keyword doesn't really matter quite as much as it used to. Then I look at the smart campaigns. I look at shopping, which is non-keyword utilized. I look at what goes into the other search programs, MSAN audience network. I look at GDN. I'm looking at responsive search ads. I'm looking at dynamic search ads. Less and less of it actually requires a true keyword as much as a few categories. And I look at certain platforms that operate without keywords completely. Yelp, for example, is a good one. It doesn't need it. Facebook, call it what it is. It's a search engine. It does not need it. So while keywords still exist, the value and necessity of them for someone to operate a true search marketing operation is becoming smaller and smaller and less of a necessity. Will they ever completely go away? Maybe, maybe not. Will we be able to fully function without keywords to run a search program? We already can.
Mm-hmm. And what about for voice search? Do you think keywords will still be pretty important for someone talking to their Alexa?
That is kind of up for debate. There was a pilot program. We literally accidentally stumbled on it about 7 years ago, where what we discovered was Google Home was actually pulling the paid search shopping listings from local inventory ads and being able to show those. That's the only known voice search capabilities that one can advertise off of that we've ever been able to find. But it makes sense as they're they're in everyone's home. I'm literally sitting in between a Google and an Alexa and the Siri on my phone right now. So not monetizing one of them would be insane. Just how far out is the question?
Awesome. So you mentioned Microsoft's audience network. So if you think audiences will play more of a bigger role in the future as opposed to keywords, how do you see sort of this getting impacted by the changes to go towards more online privacy, cookieless browsing, and a loss of third-party data?
Yeah, with the growth of the audiences, I'm looking for that. As keywords start to diminish, become less of value, the only way they can do that is if audience targeting becomes more important, more valuable. So literally, they will work on a level or a scale. When one starts to pull back, the other one will rise in importance and need and demand. We've been seeing it. We can see them work hand in hand together, but we also can see them thrive without each other. The nice part about search is one of the only digital, actually probably is the only digital marketing network that's reactive media, where someone is raising their hand saying, I want this. So there's a degree of less necessity for using an audience, but you can also say, hey, I don't need the keywords. I just want to serve this audience these ads and let Google or Bing scrape my site and say, this is what I'm going to trigger for. So yeah, it's audience is the new keyword. It's the way I look at it.
And how did you balance kind of audience and keyword based marketing, if you like, previously? Did the two play a level playing field when you're kind of running keyword ads? Because it's always been a top priority for me. But again, when there's a real strong demand signal in that keyword string, then you go after the keyword first. You go after that intent first, as opposed to even thinking about the audience. It comes as an afterthought. But I guess, what's your experience of balancing the two? And obviously the balance is going to shift over the coming years.
I mean, we use them typically hand in hand. And what I do that is I'll use the same keyword set, but I'll separate it by audience. So one audience gets a certain message, one audience, and I'll incentivize a remarketing to come back and make a purchase, where my non-visitors or new to the site visitors will get a message of encouraging a CRM sign up so I can get them into my system. So we've traditionally used them hand in hand, and you still can. Now the question is whether or not I need to continue to do hand in hand, or if I can just start to eliminate the keywords as time progresses.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then how do you then kind of decide on I guess the best platforms for the right combination of audience and keywords? So, Google's going to lead the way in terms of search engine sophistication, but when you consider the non-purist search engine, are they now becoming more and more sophisticated? So obviously the likes of YouTube is not technically a search engine, but really is a search engine for video, and how that plays a strong role, because audience has got to be, pretty much their number one kind of parameter to target in that space.
Exactly. I mean, when we look at the non-traditional, I mean, to your point, YouTube, when you break it down, YouTube's the second largest search engine in the country, if not the world. So it's a complete necessity. When we go into these alternative space scenarios, your Google Display Network, your MSAN, your YouTube, or even some of the secondary platforms like an ad marketplace or an ad media, a couple things have to be taken into account first. It's whether or not do I have budget to do it? Have I tested them before and have they proven, or am I experimenting from that? And that's always my first step. But when I start looking at these are largely audience driven. Now I can go build some type of custom audience based off my competitors' domains or based off search queries and call it a custom audience, with the exception of like the healthcare and alcohol verticals. I can do that for just about everyone under the sun. So when we start to look at it, you call them audiences, but they can be keyword driven audiences. But yes, they are audiences. They are the way you're going to run this no matter what.
And can I throw in a quick side question, which is on the experimental budget? I've always loved to ask this question of marketers. What's your experimental budget? What percentage of your all-up budget do you consider an experimental budget?
Depends on how much I can convince the client at planning. More often than not, the answer is zero, because they don't want to experiment. They want to go with what's tried and true. Some of my more adventurous clients have given me up to 10%. If I had a regular average, I'd say it's probably only between 3 and 5%, though.
That's great. Yeah, I've if I achieve more than 5%, then I'm usually in a good place, because I know out of the back of that is a lot of potential growth opportunities. I just always like to ask that question.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So, what are some search marketing myths or maybe outdated practices that you'd like to dispel for our listeners?
Oh, myths. Once, no less than once a month. So there's a variety of Facebook groups, Twitter feeds, industry trades, and open forums. At least once a month, I'm still trying to remind people that impact on your organic rankings doesn't necessarily impact your paid search rankings, which for some reason I'm still having to dispel those myths. Um, we see a variety of things. The most common one I see, and I see this at least once a week, whether it's from one of my own clients, one of my friends' clients, someone asking it within a forum. Why I don't need, the myth is I don't need to bid on my brand keywords if I'm ranking highly for them organically. And I turn around and say, no, just no, that's not the case. Unless your name is Geico or eBay, you can't do it. There have been numerous studies put out there saying it goes with a theory called 1+1=3. It's an incrementality theory, where if you run paid search, you get one visitor. You run organic only, you get one visitor, but together you get 3 visitors. Put an article out about this probably about 2 months ago, where we actually went back and found some of the original case studies. There was a PhD at Penn, unfortunately I can't remember his name at the moment, but who did an absolutely amazing PhD paper on this and showing the actual value of it. We've run a study ourselves in-house a few times, but I get this question all the time that you don't need to run paid if you're doing well for organically in your brand terms. That's just not the case. You should always be there to protect your brand. Other ones that I see is it's quote unquote illegal to bid for competitors to bid on my keywords. And my turnaround response is A, this is why you bid on your brand keywords. B, it's not illegal. C, Google is not a legal entity. They cannot enforce a legal document. They can only handle your trademarks if the competitors use your name in their ads under the trademark form. And that's only if you remember to file your trademark with the engines itself. So those, while they're very small and tertiary, those are literally the most common myths that I hear. In 16 years, I hear at least once a week, if not more often than that.
Once a week. Wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
That's
I think we
so
need to put a megaphone behind the message for sure.
So going off of that, do you recommend that people do go after their competitors? And if so, what are some tips on doing that?
Yeah, it's funny. I literally put a paper out with Search Engine Journal about 2 weeks ago on this. Honestly, there's 4 reasons you bid on competitor names. The most common one is your ego. If you can't stand seeing your competitor do well or high, then you probably don't need to be bidding on them whatsoever, because you're going to go bankrupt. Other scenarios are riding their coattails for the running out of media, trying to get yourself interjected into the space to make people understand that you're an alternative. There's another 1 or 2 reasons in there. My stance is, if you're doing it for your ego, don't do it at all, because it's going to cost you more than it'll ever give you in return. If you're doing it for other reasons, it can make sense, but please make sure that you've covered off your brand keywords first and you've already maxed out your positive return scenarios before you go off this. This is not necessarily an experimentation, but it has the ability to be, on a last click, it's going to be highly inefficient cost-wise. Highly, highly inefficient. So the only thing you're really going to do here is generate a little brand awareness to those who are completely unaware you existed as a brand, and deviate some of that traffic. You might get a sale or a lead out of it here and there, but you're not going to get rich off it. But there is purpose to it, but just don't go hog wild on it. So net, my stance is, after you maxed out the right things first, then you can go put this into your experimentation pile and try and dedicate it separately.
So it's not a priority, but
right.
Don't prioritize it above obviously the brand. But are there any kind of examples where ego has really played such a role that you were never going to convince somebody to stop, without naming names, of course?
Countless times. More often than not, I find these little travel agencies that want to go bid on Priceline or Expedia, and I'm trying to turn around. It's not going to work out for you. And the worst thing you need to do, especially if that competitor is the leader in the space and has a bottomless wallet, all they have to do is turn their frustration on you and they will ruin your day. And all your profitability will be gone in a heartbeat because they'll start conquesting after you, overlapping with you and with you straight out of the industry.
And they've got to be some of the most competitive space of travel, especially travel, things like finance.
Travel's pretty ruthless. Restaurant, QSR. The worst ones I see are insurance and financial services. Those are already incredibly expensive verticals to begin with, but the amount of saturation, the amount of competitors that are in there, and they're all trying to go after the handful of major players in there. All one of those major players has to do is say, you know what, I'm going to focus on one of these and do a shot across the bow or give them a warning shot and tell them to back off. And if they don't, that being said, there was, I think it was 2014, there was a well-known corrective vision company, because I can't say their name, who decided they were a leader in the space. They decided to go after, I think, 14 small companies. Ended up committing a degree of collusion and violating the Anti-Competitive Act of 1890 at the same time. So you also have, and it was largely ego-driven. They didn't need to do this. So they ended up settling in federal court for millions upon millions of dollars. So yeah, doing this competitively to an extreme can have some pretty harsh consequences in the long run.
Treat it carefully.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen some kind of snarky ad attempts. You don't want to go with those guys. We're way better. So I have seen a bit of cheeky copy there and some of those bidding on competitors. So it is.
Oh yeah,
it's kind of an interesting tactic. But yeah, not a priority.
My favorite is actually the mattress space, for like mattress for your bed. You'll start searching for some of the brand names, and some of the competitors will literally come out, put that name in the ad copy and say, see why they're being federally sued and why we're a better brand. And literally just call them out directly. Google will take it down, that ad down within minutes, but no telling how many impressions will be served first.
Wow. And that's, I guess, in certain jurisdictions that, it genuinely is against the law, of course. So whilst Google aren't going to enforce the law, then you're going to be in the Google jail and real jail in certain circumstances for those kinds of things.
Yeah, be careful. So localization in search engine marketing has been something that's been a bit of a challenge from day one. It doesn't look like it's getting much easier. So do you have any tips or tools for advertisers who are working in multiple markets or multiple languages with the same campaigns across different markets?
Well, actually, literally, to your point, is don't do it in one campaign. Separate it as much as you can to give that degree of localization, especially if you have brick and mortar operations. Google My Business, unfortunately, Bing places don't work quite this way. Geo-target off that and segment it out separately so that you can track and optimize directly. If you're doing English, Spanish, and French targets, well, then you need to have English, Spanish, and French campaigns set up separately. You run the risk of delineating the budget a little bit, but once you start seeing which ones have more traction, you can reallocate funds from there and there. The reality is if you don't start separating out for all these nuances now, you're going to look back on your data later and say, hey, I missed an opportunity, or I didn't get the inside lead because I didn't do it right.
And are there any kind of tools that you've really come across that perhaps in the automation space, coming back to our earlier conversation, that have helped manage that? So in my career, I've had to deal with many languages, and it gets incredibly tricky to manage it at scale. And we've never really found a tool that handles all languages in a not quite equal way, but in a close to equal way, should we say. There's always one or two of the major languages that are probably just not handled very well. Are there any great tools that you would say, this is good for you and your business?
When it comes down to language, my big things are, there's not really a tool that I use for one, because it views the language as a separate audience the way we designed and set it up. So it looked at React, and whereas the thought of language, it all theoretically therefore is treated as a single language, but it's focusing on different audience target or geo target simultaneously. The biggest thing I deal with when I start saying, all right, I want to do multi-language, is get a native speaker to make sure you write the ad copy. too often not, I'll see our friends from the UK write English ads in where they'll replace a Z with an S or add in that extra U that'll confuse. Or in my
That's
scenarios,
how it should be
we'll
spelled.
bring it. Yes, the proper English. Or in our scenarios, when we do Spanish language targeting, we'll have someone who's a native speaker from Puerto Rico write it for a Mexican audience target, or someone that's in Portugal writing it for a Brazilian target. Just dealing with the language nuances is so key when you're trying to make something feel as comfortable to a consumer.
Yeah, to your point, it's your audience is key there, right? So again, with this accent, you can probably guess I'm from the UK. I work with people that are native English speakers from around the world, but I'm still getting used to and I say Z instead of Z. So there's another nuance already in certain words, and I think you're dead right. An audience notices that it's not. Oh, it's just a letter. It's noticeable. It makes it stand out for the wrong reason, and that's obviously the thing to be avoided. My best example is some assumptions that were made early on when I was actually handling the Quebecois region of Canada, of course. So again, a different language in French, and actually it became across as quite insulting, some of the language that was delivered. So there's a cautionary tale again for our audience.
Oh, yeah.
Native speakers, most certainly.
Definitely. Awesome. It's been some really, really great insights there, John. So we like to wrap up every episode with a takeaway, something that our listeners can implement today that would help them accelerate their online businesses. So, what is one thing that you think people should be doing that they could do relatively quickly?
And honestly, this is something that's ongoing. QA. There's nothing worse than when you have your retargeting ad show up next to some really horrible content and there's a brand safety question, and you're now turning around and having to make necessary retroactive changes. Or one of my favorite ones, and this came from a client that we took over from another agency. No one was monitoring their GDN. No one was monitoring their YouTube. And this was for a nutrition client. And 40% of their media spend went to children's nursery rhyme videos and kindergarten websites. So if they were already tight on funds, so all I think is, all right, you spent 40% of money on this because no one was doing ongoing monitoring and QA process. You could have reallocated that just as easily and stretched it out further and gotten a better result. So the best thing that anyone can do, and I always been on the stance, is QA and don't stop QA. Make it as an ongoing thing.
Awesome. Great stuff there. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, John. Kevin, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Some amazing insights there from John on how to make the most of your search engine marketing. Do make sure to follow him on Twitter, where he's constantly commenting on developments in the SEM world with the handle @Jon Kagan, and that's Jon spelled Jon. If you like the episode, do make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please take a minute and rate and review us there. In 2 weeks, we'll have Nava Hopkins on the show. Nava is the director of paid media at Just Uno and a skilled PPC marketer who was also named one of the top 25 most influential PPC experts by PPC Hero. She's also extremely knowledgeable when it comes to conversion rate optimization, which is definitely a topic I'm really excited to talk to her about. So do make sure to tune in for this one. Stay safe, and we'll catch you back here next time on Optily Radio.